Last week I tried something different. I brought you an Infinity Warp character and a book character. I've done that for a couple weeks now, and I thought, you know what, let's try something different. So this month, for March, I figured we could do a theme week each week. My name is Rogue Convoy, and welcome to Transformers Week in Ultimate Mayhem. We are now officially into week number 8. I couldn't figure that out for a while. My goal for this week is to talk mostly about the leaders of the Autobots, the Decepticons, Maximals and Predacons. Decepticons and Predacons later, they share the same name. Obviously, it's Megatron. Autobots, it's Optimus Prime. The Maximal leader is Primal, Optimus Primal. So let's kick off day 1 of Transformers Week and welcome in. If you haven't seen my previous videos, please go back and check them out. Like, subscribe, leave comments. I try to respond to comments as quickly as possible, as my one friend has pointed out. So with that, let's travel to Cybertron and learn about the history of one Orion Pax and ascent to power. During this video, we're also going to cover the Maximal leader because at this point, the two histories sort of intertwine together at one point. So please sit back, put your tray tables up, and let's dive in. Welcome to Ultimate Mayhem Prime Edition. We're going to call it Prime Edition because really it's all about Optimus Prime, but it's also about Optimus Primal. So normally I give you a little bit of information about like the creation of the character and stuff. This week I figured we'll just dive right into it. So when Optimus Prime was brought online, he was a simple dock worker known as Orion Pax. He was born during the golden age of the planet Cybertron, about 9 million years before the series began. So basically, we're traveling back in time and learning about Optimus Prime as he was a young man. Obviously, we'll get to this later, but in 1984, obviously things happen. His primary function was to unload and put away energy shipments that came from the power plant. He had a girlfriend, Ariel, and his best friend was Dion. So the rumor that people believe now that is Dion is Ultra Magnus. That's the rumor, anyway. We're not 100% sure on it. That's one thing I've looked up and I've tried to understand. And no, that has not been the case. I don't know if that's the actual case. During this period, a group of new robots appeared in the sky, which Dion and Orion were amazed by the fact. Ariel was unsure of the new robots, even hearing that the leader was responsible for an attack on another city on the planet. So, we'll get into this. At one point, Orion had been working within the storage facility when 5 robots arrived where he had been working. Orion, being a naive robot, being naive, and believed that the robots were new co-workers, and he had introduced himself to them as well as the others who were working there. The flyers that were circling the dock were waved off by Orion, who immediately went back to work. So, the belief in the original, when reading some of the information and studying this, is that the original was Superion, this combiner robot that made out of 5 smaller robots that were also grouped jets. And the fact is that Cybertron was amazed when they saw these characters because they traveled from the future. And some point after that, Orion was approached by Megatron, the leader of the robots who had been flying over the city. He said that he had been looking for a place where he could store his wares, and believing him to be telling the truth, Orion took Megatron around the warehouse, showing him the facility and showing him the energy reserves. Megatron had then attacked the warehouse with the other Decepticons and basically took all the energy reserves. Ariel, Orion, and Dion were all hurt in the process of this. So they got, basically, Ariel was about to get shot at. Orion dove in front of her, and Megatron basically shot him twice. Originally, he got grazed in the shoulder, but as well as the fact that Megatron had shot Ariel once, but then the second time he was going for her, Orion dove in front of him. During the attack on the warehouse, the 5 robots that Orion had made friends with carried him away from the battle. Their hope is that they could get someone to repair him. So over the time, basically during the battle, they carried him off. They wanted to hopefully get somebody to repair him. Enter Alpha Trion, a Cybertronian blacksmith who did not want to help originally, but eventually decided to use the process he had been working on to help Orion, make the Orion and the Autobots stronger. So basically, he wanted to make sure that the Autobots had, say, an equal battleground against the Decepticons. And so after that, that is when Orion Pax became no more. He became Optimus Prime and leader of the Autobots. And hence was also given the Matrix of leadership since Alpha Trion had been hiding it since Megatron killed the previous holder. So with that, Megatron basically killed the previous holder, but was not able to capture the leadership matrix, which would have made him more powerful at that point. So Alpha Trion went to do the same process on Ariel, turning her from Ariel into Elita 1. So we learned this later on, that Ariel is also known as Elita 1 in this showcase, in the show and the whatnot. So Optimus then went back to confront Megatron, which caused the battle to go on and destroyed the warehouse and the fuel stockpiles in the process. The 5 Autobots who had saved Optimus then vanished. So Superion, I believe this is Superion we're talking about at this point, and basically he vanishes after Optimus Prime becomes Optimus Prime. Sometime after receiving the Matrix, he comes to the point of the Spider-Man cliche, and he basically understands that with great power comes great responsibility. And no Uncle Ben's and Aunt May's were hurt in the process of all this. Spoiler alert on the Aunt May. And just learns to live with the burden he's been given. So he learns to live with the Matrix inside him and also to protect himself. So for millions of years, Optimus Prime and the Elite continued to lead the Autobots in a war that exhausted all the resources within the planet. So basically they mined the resources, they kept getting the energy, but they kept also exhausting it. To continue the war, Prime ordered a voyage throughout the stars to find new resources for the people. He took his crew aboard a huge spaceship, which we know known as the Ark. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but the point is that he's taken, and Optimus was the last one to board. Basically, he was stopped by Elita, who begged to go with him. Optimus said no. He refused and said he would come back for her. But the Decepticons attacked the platform, blowing it up, possibly killing her in the process. So that's why we don't know really who she was until it comes up later. With that, Prime boarded the Ark and ordered them to leave. So the Autobot ship had some troubles, especially after traversing an asteroid field. They were caught in the tractor beam from the Nemesis. So, again, another ship learned about in Beast Wars that we probably had in Generation 1, but no one remembered the name for it. Which Megatron was the commander of. Eventually the two forces collided on the Ark, but the gravity of the planet dragged the ship down basically to the planet, burying it within a mountain. All the robots within the Autobot or Decepticon were taken offline. So they were put into stasis lock after crashing into this mountain. Now, the planet we believe it is Earth at this point. So, with that, I'm going to take a pause here because it makes more sense to go into the next version of Optimus than to continue on with the regular version, because then we can see how the histories do kind of intertwine a bit. So basically, and the point is, we can't talk really about Optimus Prime without Primal. Really, it's hard enough to do without it. So with that, I'm going to transition into Optimus Prime. I'll give you a little bit of story afterwards, and then Optimus Prime and his crew had received message that Megatron and the Predacons had gotten their hands on the Golden Disc, as well as a ship with capabilities to go to lightspeed. The irony of it all was that the Axelon was the ship Optimus was the commander of, and was also the closest one, which also possessed the same abilities as the Darkseid. So, the Maximal ship is known as the Axelon. The Predacon ship that was stolen is known as the Darkseid. And Megatron, again, the villainous leader of the Predacons at this point, took a disc from the high command of the Predacons. That, when we learn later on, we'll learn later on. I'll tell you some story about it after. Primal and his crew followed the Predacons through a portal and arrived at a planet they were unfamiliar with. The two fought beforehand, with the damage being too severe. The two ships crashed into Earth, onto the planet. So, again, as we're learning about these things, the ships crashed onto one side of the Earth and another. It's basically Earth at this point. And as the Maximal ship fell, Optimus Prime ordered all the stasis pods that they were carrying, basically the other crew members for the Axelon, that were to be put into orbit around the planet. And so, as they're basically falling down to Earth, they jettison all the pods out so that they can protect the pods. Obviously not the case with some of the crew members. And so basically the Maximal ship landed on a ridge above a waterfall, and the Predacon ship crashed into the middle of a volcanic area. So when you see the Predacon ship fall, you see it's falling onto, like, you look around it, there's all lava and all that. And the Maximal ship has landed on a ridge, basically. It's being held up, and there's a waterfall right beside it. So the new world was filled with Energon, the things that power all Transformers, in a raw format. That the Maximals and Predacons had to take new forms in the wildlife in the air. So, not necessarily that we're on the point with dinosaurs. When you watch the Predacon ship scan, it basically scans dinosaur bones to give some of them. But then there's other ones that, like Tarantulas and Scorponok, who basically got their bug formats. I don't know how they thought the giant wasp was the idea, but okay. And at the point when the Maximals were scanning as well, they found that Optimus became a silverback gorilla, and because he was sitting there with a rhino, a rat, and a cheetah. I don't know how the combination of that worked, but okay. Cheetor, though, being the young gun, he got overexcited to receive his new form so much that he was attacked by the Predacon Waspinator. The other Maximals were quick to respond. At the point, Optimus tried to reason with Megatron, but the reasoning failed, and the crews fought, thus starting what we now know as the Beast Wars. So, basically, Optimus and Megatron's cage. We tried to reason this. No. Okay. Well, then now we're going to fight. And so as the Maximals are returning home after their first fight with the Predacons, the Maximals find one of the Predacons, Dinobot, so a giant raptor basically, waiting for them on the bridge. Dinobot challenges Optimus Primal for leadership of the Maximals so he can use the forces to help destroy Megatron. The Predacons catch the duel and launch an attack on the bridge. Dinobot and Optimus begin to fall, and Optimus returns to beast mode to try to save both of them. They are eventually picked up by Rhinox and dropped on the bridge. At that point, even though he had respect for Optimus, even though he'll never show it, Dinobot rejects the Predacons and becomes a Maximal himself, basically giving them another member. Both sides eventually take their place on the opposite sides of the world, thus truly starting the Beast Wars. There had been many new dangers and twists left for them on the planet, including the one of the Predacons being possessed by Commander Starscream. So we could really do another whole series on just Starscream, because Starscream is another fascinating character. Optimus being captured by standing stones. So what we've come to the realization when you're watching Beast Wars, and if you haven't checked this out, I do recommend it. It's a little bit of a fascinating story. You see a group of stones. It's basically Stonehenge, but obviously they don't mention it by name. Well, Optimus, while inside, was able to communicate with the team and basically put Rat Trap in charge of the group while he was out of the commission until such time as he was able to return. So he was captured by some aliens. They basically said, okay, we're about to annihilate the world. When Inferno, so again, another ant. It's an ant who basically believes that his colony was the stasis pod until such time as he basically starts following Megatron, calling him his queen. You should really watch it. It's pretty funny. Presents evidence of the aliens arriving shortly. Megatron calls Primal for the truce. Optimus agrees while they were visiting a new structure created by the aliens. And this is basically what I just said earlier about the whole Optimus Prime is basically talking to these guys, and they basically want to wipe out the planet, annihilating everything to protect the timeline. Doesn't that sound familiar? Mr. Barry Allen. Anyway. And the Maximals arrive back at their ship to find Tarantulas and Black Arachnia getting ready to run away from the planet. Basically, apparently, during their version of this, Earth had 2 moons, and one of them they turned into a giant super weapon. And Optimus took a stasis pod up from Earth and basically went into it and destroyed it, even though the plan was for him to eject out moments before the pod hit. Megatron said, okay, nope, Beast Wars is over. You lose. And instead drove the pod into the weapon with Optimus still inside of it. Now, I was reading a little bit of a story about the Beast Wars manga, and I really do want to check this out because I find the story there was kind of funny. So, Optimus was headed for the afterlife, like in the show, but apparently Rhinox was able to get to him. But in this case, Rhinox said, "Okay," Optimus said, "Let me die," kind of thing, just let me die. Rhinox said no, slapped some sense into him, and basically brought him back. Now, this is the same thing that happened in the show, except for the fact that we didn't get to see Rhino slap the shit out of Optimus. I wanted to see that. But basically, he became a purple gorilla with a hoverboard underneath his feet. Basically, after Primal returned, they lost several people, including Tigertron and Arrow Razor. But the wave that Optimus basically sacrificed himself for was about to reach Cybertron, and the rescue would have been imminent. The truth is, though, that the Predacons saw the wave coming first and used it for their own advantage. And basically used it to their own advantage to find where Megatron was and send in Ravager. Now, they sent in, basically Ravager had become a bounty hunter after the Great War for them, and was a converted tape of the Decepticon Soundwave. As you know, that Soundwave would shoot open his chest and several tapes would fly out, including Ravager and Laserbeak. Primal reminded Silverbolt that it was dangerous to be in a relationship with Predacon Black Arachnia. Basically, once Megatron was found arrested by Ravager, and then was taken aboard the ship, but then realized that the golden disc had a little message in there from the original Megatron, saying basically, if you hear this, kind of how my plan has failed, and now we're going to do this my way. We'll talk about this later on in the Megatron video. And hence allowed Megatron to escape and head to the Arc site, where he tried to assassinate the Autobot leader to change the history of the war and have the Autobots lose. So the Great War, within the Great War, obviously there would have been no Optimus Prime, and hence the Autobots would lose the war. The Maximals managed to get the life support functions of the Arc back online and hook Prime up to it for the time being, but he was too damaged and basically he was dying in the process. Primal Man, basically the purple monkey travels up to the spark and travels up to the chest plate, opens the chest, takes out his sparks, puts it with his, and we go from this transmetal gorilla to basically still a gorilla, but in the size of some of his Autobot counterparts. And Optimus Primal, once all the repairs are complete and the battle with Megatron is over, they lose their base in process, but they gain a new one by going to the Arc site and building around it, hence protecting the Arc for the rest of the show. So now I want to use a quote from Black Arachnia. She basically summed this up the best, going so that we can go back into a little bit into Optimus Prime as well. So she said, "Oh no, it's no legend, Bowser. The ship contains some of Cybertron's greatest heroes. When it explodes in 1984, our ancestors will awaken and start the Great War." So that means in 1984, after everything is said and done, the Autobots will wake up and hence start the Great War with the Decepticons again. After the Beast Wars in the past, the volcanoes where the Maximals had set up to protect the Ark erupted, waking the defense system on the ship, bringing it back to life. Bring back to life the Decepticons first. Apparently this thing was biased for whatever reason. And thanks to Starscream, the Autobot leader himself was awakened by Teletran 1. So the whole defense system of the Ark was known as Teletran 1. Which he thanked the machine and then woke up the rest of his comrades, thus protecting the humans and introducing themselves to Sparkfly and the Spike, and who agreed to help them learn about the Earth. So they crashed there, but they also then learned from humans what the Earth was like and how they could use it to their advantage. So with that, we are now finished day one of our Transformers week. We were originally, like I said, I was going to break this into 2 videos originally, but I didn't. After talking with one of my friends and whatnot, he figured this could be done in about 20 minutes max. I didn't agree with him, but we moved on. So tomorrow or Saturday, I'm going to have part 2 of this and also part 3. So we're going to do, next time, we're going to do Megatron, the Generation 1 hand cannon, and also the T-Rex with skates. After that, I would like to try to do the Minicons or Starscream, because I feel like that would be the most important thing here. So let the multiverse be your guide at this point. Let it decide where you're going. Let it help you decide what the fate is. And then we're going to come back, obviously. And my name is Rogue Convoy. This has been Transformers Week Part 1, Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.